I was the senior prop fabricator for both the original Harry Potter park in Orlando, as well as Diagon, and as well as making props for California. I was the main prop fabricator and, in a lot of cases, designer for the background things you see in the windows or in the dark arts class or all around the balcony at Diagon Alley at Morgan and Burke's, and so on. There's a couple of different ways to approach it. Sometimes you're just given a space, dimensions, and said and told, here is the theme of this shop or this window, and here's the size. Go. And other times you're given a very detailed list because it's something very specific to the movie. The butterbeer still in the window of the butterbeer shop. That was a very last minute thing. The way the story came down to me was there was a plan for it that had fallen through and it had not gotten picked up again until the last minute. And it was just a rack of butterbeer steins stuck up there that didn't seem to capture anything. There was no wonder in that window. So they wanted to make a real complex looking butterbeer distillery. And that was the instruction, come up with a butterbeer distillery. So working in a warehouse with all the extra Potter parts we had and kind of taking an inventory of the shapes and things and looking at taking real distilleries, all the oddest ones we could find as an example. As examples, that's what kind of came together. It's supposed to be in one window, it goes up over the door and then down the other side. So it's two big windows filled with butterbeer making machinery goodness. It was all kind of made up at the last minute. So it was kind of an emergency thing, but a really good example of what you can do just sort of as a freeform artist if you're familiar with the theme. And we've been doing Potter for 3 years, so we're very familiar with the theme. Whereas some other things, you'll see down in the extended queue for the Gringotts ride in Diagon is a full-size version of the Gringotts vehicle that Harry and the gang rode down to the Dragon. We built that from blueprints, and we were very specific about it. Actually made this model of it based on the blueprints that we got. So this miniature is actually accurate to the film, and that was also made from the exact blueprints that we got to do the full size. Wasn't quite so freeform, except we had to get very creative with some of the materials. The model is mainly plastic and little brass pieces that I cut out with little hand riveting and things. The full-size one was a mixture of steel, aluminum, fiberglass. We had the wheels custom cast for that. One of them was actually kind of bent and didn't fit in right. So I made you'll see that wheel is taken off of the vehicle on the set, and it's in a cart in a big vise, and there's some goblin-sized tool. So it looks like it's under repair, and that's why it's there. So we kind of made a little sub-story, take some lemons and turn it into lemonade and make a little story out of the damaged wheel. But I think we carried it off pretty well. A lot of times you'll get something from the movies. They're totally not suitable for theme park use. A lot of things are just made out of plywood or things that wouldn't live outdoors in Florida or in a room in Florida where you keep a door open. You know what I mean? So a lot of things from movies we can't really use, but if a movie produces molds of things, we can take and then produce from that to our, providing we have access to produce from that to our. But as far as our particular warehouse went, there were some things like that were sent to us from films, some things that came to us from other productions, spears and swords and shields and the like from other films that we could modify and use as decor in the background. There's also just piles of scrap brass and crystals and magnifying lenses and PVC and things like that. So just a mix of everything that you could grab that looked like it could be turned into something interesting. In the dark arts class is a good example. I did a set of creatures that aren't really canon to the movies, because we were just supposed to be like a museum display of weird cryptid kind of things, right? Here's an example right here. These little guys, they're just kind of snail shell-looking squid. Well, they take up a space in a jar in the dark arts class, along with several other creatures that I just sort of made up like that as background things. And then, of course, once you did the Harry Potter here, you had to do it again. And then I guess the crews that have done the Harry Potter since have been charged with duplicating these guys. So when you have, sometimes you have to keep your molds, keep your blueprints, and keep your plans in mind, because you never know when you're going to be required to make it again. That was especially true of the creatures, because there was the dark arts class in the queue for Hogwarts just needed to look full, right? So there were lots of things that are stuck in there that are from the films, representative of it, but there's still so much space in it. So it would become how many bell jars can we fit in this space, and what can we put in them? How many cages can we put in there? How many skulls can we put over here? It was always looking for something more to do. So it allowed me and my staff to get creative and create creatures and things that hadn't been seen in the films as space filler, and it was fun to do it. And I think we carried it off pretty well, trying to make it look like it belonged there, yet it hadn't been seen anyplace. That's, I guess, more than anything else, what we tried to establish was just to stay with the look. Even if you know that people are going to say, well, those weren't in any particular film. No, but they looked like they could be, right next to the weird things like that being created. We're making dozens of flower pots filled with mandrakes and things that we did have reference for that were, that were canon to them. So, mix and match, make stuff up or stick very closely to a design. One of the first pieces I did for the project was the big slide projector that sits in the back of the dark arts class with the circle, and that was something that I had to stick very close to. I was even provided with blueprint plans for it. Not knowing we were going to make a second one, I ended up making 3 of those things, all from the blueprints. They were from the film. Several of the blueprints we got were blueprint sets that we got were right from Stuart Craig's plans for the vehicle. There were a lot of challenges. I think the biggest challenge was just the scope of project. It was thousands of individual items, not just the handful of bugs. And there were, that we had our paint staff and our buying staff and everything. The fabricators, there were less than a dozen of us putting these things in. Everything that goes in a window, everything that's hanging on a wall, if it wasn't purchased from a vendor, it had to come through our shop. And so the scope was the biggest challenge, trying to prioritize all of that, because you also had to be ready when a shop was ready to be decored, to have those things done and ready to install, while simultaneously building in advance for ones that weren't finished yet, and then making adjustments to things that you'd already done, because nothing is ever finished. Then doing it again for Diagon and having to meet your level of detail and want to do better and make more, trying to top everything we've been allowed to do the first time was even more of a challenge. Individual pieces, well, the Gringotts vehicle was a challenge, and it required the efforts of everybody in the shop to do that, because it was such a big piece. And it's on a steel frame. It literally weighs 2 tons. Installing it alone was a process. For me personally, there's a couple of places that I really take pride in myself. Wiseacres being one of them, because I was given a free hand to just fill the space, and I had a personal goal. I kept approaching Eric with different little napkin sketches, because I didn't have any blueprints to work from with that. It was just continue with the look, get this idea approved, and build it. I just had an arbitrary goal of building something at least 10 feet long that would just fill a big space. And the largest scope up there is 10'6". So I made that goal. That project was my favorite, because everything there I was allowed to. Everything has a function too. I had just to keep it straight in my head, I wrote down what everything was supposed to do, so I could make it look like when you explain it that's what it does. They all have names, they all have functions, they all have designations, and when they were built, and who they would best be used in the wizarding world. Even if it's fictional, even if it's not real, you should at least have an idea of what it does, and then that helps you decide how it does it. And with magic, it's it's sort of weird. It's not like steampunk. In fact, I tried very hard when people said, "Oh, that looks very steampunk." No, it's not steampunk. There's no boiler. There's nothing on this. If anything, the term I used was mage punk. This is magically driven, right? So while that Gringotts vehicle looks like it's all engineered to run on its own somewhere, if you look at it, there's no engine, there's no boiler, there's a series of counterweights and wheels, and it's all powered by magic, right? What holds that track together? Magic. There's, a lot of times you just have to sort of engineer something that looks flimsy and say, how is that doing that? Magic. But then magic gives you a great excuse to get away with a lot of designs and things that don't make any sense until then you put it in the context of what it's supposed to be. There's one actually I had to edit that in thinking back, and I don't know if anyone's ever seen it. When you're writing Forbidden Journey and you're in the benches and you first leave the load area, okay, and you're kind of flying through the astronomy tower. There's a whole slew, months and months of work went into the duplicates of all of Dumbledore's astronomy equipment that's so fogged over because of that transition that you don't really see it. There's a 12-foot tall, 15-foot long replica of Dumbledore's telescope chair that we built that's hidden in this big stone silo with all the stone weights and chains hanging from it that most people don't see, because you're flying, you get that little drop in the stomach and you're looking around, you're having a good time, and all the smoke and the lights, and you miss that stuff. So the next time you're on that, as soon as you leave, look down and look in front of you and look at all the rich detail that's on the walls and in that part of the set, because because of the nature of where it is in the ride and how you're just being introduced to everything, that you miss it. I miss it, and I know where it is. So there's some little gems in there that are really astounding once you're like, whoa, why didn't I see that before? Where was this stuff? Harry Potter was a chance, a real chance for me to stretch as an artist, not just in doing copies of something someone else designed, but also getting to design things myself and challenge myself to copy the feel without stepping on toes. There's kind of a balance you have to draw. You don't want to rip off, but you don't want to not pay homage to in a lot of ways. And I've learned there's a lot of subtle things to navigate beyond just manipulating clay and X-Acto. And I feel I've become better at it. And they keep asking me back to do it. So I guess I've learned something. It's helped me as an artist, not just to do the park projects, but to do things like just for fun and just as a test of how accurate could I get something. Okay, this is one of my favorite pieces, and it came from just my love of working a diagonality. In the movie, when you first see the dragon in the basement of Gringotts, right, and he's the poor thing is horribly abused. And it responds to the shaking cans, right? And my wife, who's a huge Harry Potter fan, and I were just discussing, well, why does he react like that to these rattling cans? And just kind of in my brain, this vehicle is the vehicle they use to train the dragon. It's not very nice, and it rattles like crazy. And when you rattle the cans, it reminds him of the sound this vehicle makes when the team comes to straighten him out. So it was just a little piece of fiction. I even wrote a story for it and everything. It was, but it was a fun piece to build. And I take that to shows, and people get to look at it. Got all kinds of lighting effects and everything that's going. But that is a dragon fighting vehicle designed to do the kind of sad damage that the Gringotts dragon has. I mean, if you've ever really looked at the sculpture up close when he's on the bank tower out front, that's not neglect, that's abuse. That's very sad. The most amazing part of doing a project like this is the team you find yourself on, and how everybody's competent to this level. Once the project's done, you can step back and go, what a great bunch of folks that was.